Hey, everybody. Josh Sheridan here with the Barely Legal Podcast.
They demand my alter ego, but I won't go because of you.
On today's show, I have another cousin. I'm going to do one cousin a week. And with my wife's Italian family, that should put me somewhere in like 2025 before I run out of guests. But on today's show, I have Chuck Waygood. He is another one of my favorite people in the world. One of the great things about the family that I married into is there's so many amazing role models for me. You know, I'm now without a father, and so I have to look elsewhere to friends and family to model myself after, what the ideal man should be. And Chuck Waygood is definitely an ideal man. So thank you so much for coming in.
I appreciate that.
I always like to build people up and make it really embarrassed right at the outset.
Totally. You did well.
So, I had Chris Bryan in last week, and I don't know, I know you started to listen to it. We had some technical difficulties with that whole show coming out, but the problem I have here is I try to do these in the beginning and go to the end, but I end up just jumping around a bunch.
Sure.
So you're going to have to follow me. You came up in that regarding the night before he got married and the liquor bar getting just completely crushed the night before he got married. And he was informed the bill was like, I don't even know. Is this a story your wife knows about? Or
I'm trying to remember. I wish I had listened to that part of the podcast, but I'll tell you, it's the last 10 years are a blur, man.
Well, you're just such a rock in this family. You're just I'm sure behind closed doors you're a monster, but by all outward appearances, you're just, a solid dude, even keel guy. I really have a lot of respect for you, but I as much as I love you, I know very little about you up until a certain point. So are you from New York originally? Are you from the Northeast originally?
Yes. Originally grew up in New York, right outside of New York City.
Really?
And yep.
So what would that be called? Is there a
Westchester County?
Westchester County.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's made famous by now the Clintons, and unfortunately, but I lived on Sleepy Hollow Road. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Legends of Sleepy Hollow.
Of course I have. Ichabod Crane, Legends
Yes.
of Sleepy Hollow. Is that the actual Sleepy Hollow that's referred to in that story?
It's the actual Sleepy Hollow, yes.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it was cool growing up.
Was that something you thought of when you were a little kid? Like, was that kind of a cool thing?
It was.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. We actually used to do tours of the different places up there that have relevance in a lot of the old fables and things like that, because a lot of them were written up there in that area. So
now you have a brother and two sisters?
I have a brother and two sisters, yes. Two older sisters and a younger brother.
Okay. And have you hit 50 yet?
I hit 50 in 2 weeks.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
So you got any big plans?
The end is near. Angelia and I are going to just shelter in place in a hotel and try and relax and get out of this madness for a couple of days.
I know. It's such a bummer. Like all these birthdays and all these big life events that are happening. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, well, we're going to go hang out in our backyard for a couple hours.
I had grand plans that were dashed over the last few months.
Well, for sure. Between the Pocono. Well, not only that, but for your work, you were traveling a good amount, right?
I was. Yeah. I typically travel out to San Francisco once a month.
And isn't the company out of Italy?
The company is based out of SF. Okay. Our founders are Italian and immigrated from Milan to SF back in 2010.
Okay.
So there's definitely a heavy Italian influence.
So trips to home base or San Francisco, not to Italy.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Correct.
So growing up in Sleepy Hollow, one of four, what did your parents do?
My dad was an attorney.
Was he really?
Yeah. Yeah. My dad
was. How did I not know that?
We've probably talked about it, but there's just so much.
I'm usually shit-faced when I'm talking to you.
Right.
And you brought me in some beer, so we're started already. Exactly. So this is what happens.
So mom was, she was mom. She was a stay-at-home mom, and dad.
What is Waygood? What nationality is Waygood?
It's Scottish, English, and Irish.
I love you.
So my middle name is Macaulay.
Oh my God, I love you.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and what was your mom's maiden name?
Bose, which is English.
All right. So you're just waspy, Scotchy.
Very waspy.
All right. Great. And so was yours a religious family?
Not really. My dad was raised Protestant, and my mom was very Catholic. My grandfather on my mother's side actually studied to be a priest. He was going to become a priest until he realized that Couldn't have any fun because my grandfather liked to have a lot of fun.
Right.
So we had a heavy Catholic influence growing up.
Sure.
My dad never attended, as you could imagine, but we did all the sacraments growing up and followed.
But do you have that guilt? Do you have that Catholic guilt?
I don't.
Burnt into your soul?
Luckily, I don't.
Luckily, you don't. That's right.
my wife has plenty of it for both of us.
There you go.
So.
She can spread it around. So your sisters, are they quite a bit older than you?
They are. Let's see. I don't
mean to.
No, that's fine. My next oldest sister is Carolyn, and she is 10 years older than me. And then the next is Connie. No, she's 8 years older than me. And then Connie is 10 years older than me. So we have 8 and 10.
I've always theorized that having older sisters is a great thing at a certain age, but I guess it depends on how much older. Like you want to be in 8th grade when your sisters are like juniors in high school.
Right.
Because then all their friends come over and you're cute and they can kind of hang out with you.
Well, I still had my fun.
Well, 10 to 8 years older, man, they were driving you around to buy beer probably.
Oh, well, I mean, it was, I remember going in and flirting with my sister's friends when I was, 6, 7 years old because they're 15, 16 years old. And I'd throw on my suit and walk in there and they'd just think I was the cutest thing in the world.
You are. So what about sports? Were you a football player, baseball player?
So I grew up, my sports growing up were baseball, golf, and skiing. I actually wanted to be an Olympic skier.
Oh, wow.
And so I was going down that route and I skied as much as I could in the Northeast. And my dream was to get a full ride to University of Vermont. And then my dad came home my junior year, well, actually my sophomore year and said, we're moving to Florida. So those dreams were dashed.
Ski teams don't do well in Florida.
No.
Now, were you close enough in Westchester to just drive to a hill somewhere? Or?
We did. We had a ski team at the high school and they were pretty good. So we would go 3 times a week to the mountain, and then 2 days a week we'd do dry land practice. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't much, but and then on the weekends, you'd go to Vermont or you'd go to Pennsylvania. My parents have a house up in the Poconos, so that's how I actually got into ski racing, was going up there on the weekends. So how
old were you when you moved down here?
I moved down here when I was 15, so right before my junior year.
Oh, that's kind of fucked in the middle of high school. How was that?
It was tough to start because.
What school did you go to down here?
I went to Shorecrest Prep down in St. Pete.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, the thing that was nice about that was it was small.
Sure.
It was
that was like the rich kid school when I was over there.
Yeah. But I lived on the completely other side of town. So I grew up on Park Street out by Treasure Island.
Sure.
And would drive into school every day.
There's some nice houses out that way.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. So, but because my dad at the time, when my dad retired from Manhattan and came down to teach at the law school. So he taught at Stetson. So,
what years did he teach at Stetson?
So we came down in 85. He taught there in 86 to probably 90 and became dean of students, I think, in 89, and probably did that for a couple of years as well. Yeah.
What did he teach? Do you remember?
My dad was a litigator, so he did a lot of trial practice and stuff like that.
Nice. So, he didn't pass the law bug on to you.
No, we had 4 kids and none of us went law.
None of us did it.
It's funny because my dad
came home and bitched about it constantly.
My dad is a purist, and the thing that he hated about practicing law, especially in Manhattan, as you could imagine, was the politics of the law firm.
Right.
He loved law. He loved practicing law. He hated the law firm. And so he would come home and he'd complain about it. And it was just like, I don't want to go there.
That's all you had to hear.
Yeah.
Now, how were you as a student in New York and in Florida? Were you a troublemaker? Were you a class clown?
I had my fun. I definitely, I never took it too seriously. And that's kind of the way I approach life. So I probably got by.
Right.
So I would say I was mediocre at best.
Right. Right into college, or did you take some time off?
I went right into college. I actually started at Stetson.
Okay.
So I went to Stetson, DeLand, for a year, and then transferred to the University of Colorado. And
how did that? Was that a skiing move, or what was?
No, actually, it was funny because the deal with my dad when I graduated high school was I wanted to go to Florida State.
Okay.
And my dad said, no, you won't go to Florida State because you won't get any work done there. So he said, you got to go to Stetson. And I said, okay, I'll go to Stetson. But if I don't like it after a year, can we then consider transfer? He said, sure. So during the course of my freshman year, I actually, at Stetson, your personal life, your party life
Right.
is completely revolving around the Greek life.
Sure.
So I rushed a fraternity, and during my freshman year, the fraternity got thrown off campus.
Oh man.
My
How close are you
dad,
to Daytona Beach?
25 minutes,
geographically?
30 minutes.
So you've just got every bad
Oh, yeah.
influence in the world.
Well, and DeLand, I don't know if you've been to DeLand, but DeLand is nothing except for Stetson University.
Yeah.
And Stetson University is nothing in and of itself.
Right.
I think it's 2,200 kids.
The Mad Hatters.
Yeah. So it was an odd existence
Sure.
living in DeLand. And it was interesting because when we got thrown off campus, I called my dad and I said, Dad, what they're charging us with is total bullshit.
Oh, so you're actually involved in whatever.
Oh yeah, it was a hazing incident
Okay.
at an offsite, and I was
Two
there.
people
through the whole
died. It
thing.
was not a
no,
big
nobody
deal.
died. This kid said that he got beat up,
Yeah.
and I was with him the entire night.
Yeah.
It was the pledge class after me, and so my dad had been part of that fraternity when he went to Stetson
Oh, wow.
back in the 50s, right? So I called my dad. I said, Dad, this is total bullshit. We're getting railroaded. And my dad was at the administration at the law school. So my dad's like, you know what? I'll come up and I'll represent the fraternity. So my dad came up and represented the fraternity and met with the administration.
Right.
And he's like, well, he walks into my dorm room after the meeting and he goes, you know what? If you want to transfer, you can transfer. This place is a fucking shithole now.
Yeah.
And these people are trying to railroad you.
I
And he
love
goes-
it.
He goes, so you can go wherever you want to,
That's badass.
except Florida State.
Except
So,
jeez.
so I said, okay, if I can't go to Florida State, where can I go? And he said, how about the University of Colorado? And I was like, oh,
What did
absolutely.
he just throw a dart at a map, or how did?
Well, he knew that my passion was skiing still.
Right.
And he knew that he kind of took that
So
away
he
from
didn't
me.
want you to go to FSU because he's afraid you wouldn't get anything done. But he
Right.
sent the skiing fiend to University of Colorado.
Right. And I'll tell you, it was the greatest move that I could have ever made because it completely took me out of an East Coast mindset.
Yeah.
And the only reason I wanted to go to Florida State was because all my buddies from high school went to Florida State. So I would have stayed in that same bubble and had the same influences and the same perspective on life. And going out to Colorado just completely broadened my horizons.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about this, I graduated high school in 88. So I was there in 90, 91, 92, 93 is when I graduated in 93. And at the time, I'd never taken a women's studies class. I'd never taken American Black history classes. So I had all that exposure.
Was your family
Then.
conservative, liberal, moderate? Were
My
they?
dad was a Democrat.
Okay.
My dad was a pretty staunch Democrat.
Okay.
Again, he practiced law because he believed in law and he
Civil
believed in
liberties
taking care
and
of people.
constitutional law and all this
Right.
kind of stuff.
So he imparted that on us. But growing up, as you can imagine, growing up in Westchester County and then going to Shorecrest Prep in St. Pete, very, very Republican.
Sure. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
right side. And so going out to Boulder,
So going back.
it was,
Yeah.
and coming from Stetson, I mean, Stetson University is a Baptist university.
Right. So
So I went out to Boulder and it was like
kind
180
of got
degrees from
the duality of Chuck Waygood.
Right.
You're like what is it, Leonardo DiCaprio in The Departed? It's like you spend the weekends in Southie and then you spend the week
Totally.
the high end.
Yeah, it was cool.
So Colorado, 3 years in and out.
3 years. And
Did you ski for them? Did you play any sports for them?
I didn't play any sports for them. They didn't have a baseball team, but I
Okay.
played on the club baseball team for a little bit. Skiing there, they're the national champion year after
it's like
year.
wrestling in Iowa or something like that.
And the way they stack that team is, I mean, you're lucky to make it if you're an American.
Yeah.
You got to be like the top junior skier in America to make it because every single person is like Norway, Sweden,
Yeah.
Finland.
Yeah.
So it's unbelievable.
Badass. But I just have to imagine that was a great 3 years.
It was amazing. I mean, it was cool because I transferred out there with two buddies from Stetson who were surfers. So we all got into snowboarding when we got out there.
Wow.
And
How'd you meet Jimmy? Was that later?
I met Jimmy after college. So when I graduated college, I came back. I thought I wanted to do hotel and resort management, right?
So was that
Restaurant
your
management.
degree or?
My degree was marketing.
Okay.
And so I came back and I ran a restaurant for a year.
What restaurant?
Ponderosa Steakhouse.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, good old
Is
Pondy.
Ponderosa still around?
No, they went out as part of the Metro Media.
Wasn't there one over by
Bankruptcy.
Tyrone Square Mall by like
Yeah.
the Crossroads Theater out there?
The one I was a manager of was on 4th Street.
Okay.
So
What was the one that was, no, that was Steak and Ale. Steak
Steak and Ale, it's all part of the same
Is it
family.
really?
Yeah, it was all Metro Media Steakhouses.
God.
So I did that for a year.
Yeah.
And realized that I did not want to work Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, stuff like that. Which is
Not
what's
only
really
that,
fun.
but I did the restaurant deal in college, and I did Cha-Cha Coconuts the year between college and law school. And there's just this whole niche, and much respect to people who work in that world. I'm not being condescending or denigrating, but it's a whole other type of living.
Oh my God.
You're chasing a high, you're chasing a drunk, you're chasing it's almost like, did you ever see Taxi Driver?
Oh yeah.
You know how like Robert De Niro drives around the city in the midnight hours and he kind of sees life at its grimiest.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you sleep till 3, you work from 4 to 1 in the morning, you fold up all your fucking napkins and take your bar stock, and then you go to a bar with your friends and drink till 4 or 5 in the morning.
Well, and I'll tell you, I mean, that was, so when I graduated Colorado, I graduated in December, and I got a job with a hotel
out there or in Florida?
In Aspen.
Oh man.
So I moved to Aspen right after Christmas, right after New Year's actually. And I moved to Aspen with my little brother. My little brother had just graduated high school.
What's your little brother's name?
Jim.
We're going to talk more about him later.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So my little brother and I moved to Aspen, Colorado, and we both worked. So I worked for a hotel. I ran the food and beverage in the hotel, especially the bar, in like the afternoons, right? So I would work the afternoons, and my brother was a bus boy at Planet Hollywood. And
you guys living together?
We were living together. So we were sharing a room.
Sounds amazing.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And through my job, we got a season pass. So he would use it during the day when I would be working, and then the days off, I would use it, right? So we skied a ton, snowboarded a ton.
What years would this have been?
This was January through April of 1994.
Okay.
Okay. And so that life was, I would literally work until 2:00 in the morning, party with friends until probably 3. I'd get up at 5. I'd run the restaurant in the morning until about noon, go ski for 3 hours, then go back to work at 5 and work until 2.
And that got old after a while?
That got old. So that's when I realized, you know what, this shit isn't going to work long term. And I actually got a job with a recruiting company.
Okay.
So got a job with a recruiting company in Tampa.
Did they recruit you, or did you seek them out, or how did that work?
I actually got introduced to them by a good buddy of mine who was Todd Turner's good friend, roommate in college.
Okay.
And he had just started there, and he knew that I hated the restaurant business. I had to get out. And he's like, come talk to these guys. You'll love it. And it was great. I had no idea what it was going to do for my career, but literally I've been in it
ever since.
So.
Now, so enter Jimmy. What's Jimmy's name?
So Jimmy Schimpf.
Jimmy Schimpf he's like a better looking Morrissey. Every time I see him, I tell him he looks just like more. I'm going to post on the Facebook page.
Dude,
so
you got to get Jimmy on here because
I got it. I'll just turn the recorder on and walk out of the room for an hour, and he'll just talk.
And Jimmy,
I miss him.
He's awesome. So it was cool. So I was working at this recruiting firm in Tampa, and they were looking to promote me and actually move me out of Tampa.
Right.
But they said I couldn't leave until I hired my replacement. Enter Jimmy Schimpf. So Jimmy comes into the office, and I sit down with him. Jimmy's fresh out of App State, football player from App State.
He was yoked back then. I mean, he was a big dude.
Jacked.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, he backed up Dexter Coakley at linebacker at App State. So Jimmy was bad, and he and I just hit it off right away. And I'm like, you're working here. I didn't tell him that I was leaving.
Right.
So he came in, I trained him, and then I said, brother, I hate to do this to you, but I'm moving to Miami. You're taking over my spot here. And he and I have been friends ever since.
So I don't even know that I knew you moved to Miami.
Yeah. So I moved. So I only worked in Tampa for them for like 10 months.
Where does the spa fall in this timeline? Is that later or is that
It's
around?
later.
Okay.
So I did, 10 months in Tampa with this company called Tech Systems, and then moved to Miami.
Right.
And we sold South Florida for a while. So I did that for like 4 years.
Now, what market were you recruiting in? Was it
It's
just
all IT.
IT? Okay.
So I've always been in IT,
Okay.
Software developers, software engineers,
Okay.
network engineers, things like that.
Okay.
And which is a good niche to be in.
Right. Well, I mean,
it's constantly
tip of the
changing.
spear way
Yeah,
of
it's
the
great.
future. I mean,
Exactly.
hopefully it's always on the edge of where we're going. So
Right.
it's not going to be outdated or made obsolete.
Right.
So,
Right.
all right. So you were in Miami for how long?
So I was in Miami for 4 years.
How was that?
That was awesome.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean,
Were you near South Beach, or where were you?
I wasn't. I actually lived in Lauderdale.
Okay.
And so I had buddies that lived in Coconut Grove, so
Right.
I would go down there and party with them. And
I'm so proud of you to have found yourself in all of these potential rabbit holes that you didn't succumb to. You could have been a ski rat for the rest of your
Totally.
life. You could have been a South Beach guy for the rest
Oh
of
my
your
God,
life,
yeah.
but somehow you pulled your shit together and made it back to Tampa.
well, it's definitely a roller coaster.
Yeah, yeah.
So
You were in Miami for 4 years. What brought you back?
so the company promoted me again and moved me to Austin, Texas. So I moved to Austin, Texas, and I was out there for 4 years.
God.
And I was working on site at Dell Computers. And it's funny because I was reunited with Jimmy again out there.
Right.
I was working on site at Dell for tech. And one day I get a call from Jimmy and he's like, hey, I'm moving to Austin. I was like, no shit, that's awesome. Great. What are you going to do? I'm going to work at Dell. I'm like, holy shit, that's great. You're going to love it. Great company.
Yeah.
Austin is Dell.
Yeah.
Dell is Austin.
Yeah.
And he comes out there, he gets a job, and believe it or not, he turns into a client of mine for like the last 12 months I was there.
So you can like expense going out drinking with him every night.
And we used to do a lot. Because at the time, Texas.
You're putting in some good hours,
Oh,
Chuck.
man.
Doing some marketing.
Hell yeah.
You're really getting in there with the clients.
But I'll tell you, it paid off. I mean, Jimmy and I did a shitload of business together.
Yeah.
Made a lot of money for tech systems, and we learned a lot. And we learned that we could work together, which was
Right.
even better because then that led to the spa.
Right.
So we were in Austin.
I don't know if I knew Jimmy was part of that.
Jimmy was part of
Okay.
that. So Jimmy and I started building the concept in Austin. So
Now, you just to jump for a second. So, Chuck's married to my wife's cousin, Angelia, who we affectionately refer to as Weewa, and she is a superhero. She is a personal trainer, Pilates instructor. I don't even know what I would call her, but I mean, she trains like half the judges and all the elite in Tampa and all this other
Yeah.
stuff. But were you a big fitness guy before you met her, or did that kind of happen?
well, the
after
way Angelia and I met
Okay.
was I was teaching a fitness class at the YMCA downtown.
that? Okay. The one that she used to make me run up and down the fucking
Yeah,
stairs.
Krav Maga.
Oh
Remember
my
we used to
God.
do
Oh, that's
Krav
right,
Maga
that's right,
together.
that's right.
Yeah, so we did Krav Maga, and so I was teaching like a 6 o'clock class at the Y. Angelia was teaching the 5 o'clock class at the Y. So I'd get there
Just out water.
each day,
Yeah.
and I'd see her, and she's all ripped up, and
Yeah.
so yeah, that's
Okay. So, anyways, I pulled you off focus. So, you and Jimmy started working on the plan for the spa
we
when
were-
you guys
yeah.
were in Austin.
So we were in Austin, and at the time it was 2001. So 9/11 hit,
Ugh.
right? And
Great time to open a spa.
well, and but that was the impetus for it because
Right.
we were both working. I was working for Tech Systems. He was working for Dell, and Dell started going through these layoffs because we hit the downturn, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the first time in history that Dell was having layoffs, and they didn't know how to manage it. They managed it terribly, and it dawned on us that corporate life is kind of bullshit.
Sucks. Yeah.
And there's no emphasis on wellness. And my sister had built an Oracle consulting firm already and spun it off and sold it and had retired. And she had gone through the same corporate burnout.
Right.
So Jimmy and I created this whole wellness concept of spa, fitness, basically taking a destination spa.
Yeah.
And I said, why do people need to spend thousands of dollars to go away to fix themselves when they should be able to just integrate it into their daily life?
Right.
So we built basically a destination spa concept into a day spa, fitness center, wellness center.
And that was in
concept.
Sarasota?
It was in Bradenton.
Bradenton. And how did you select that location?
That was entirely up to my sister.
Okay.
So my sister lived in Palmetto at
Okay.
the time, lived on the water in Palmetto, and she found this property right on the river, right on the Manatee River, and it was beautiful. So, but it was interesting because when we packed up in Austin, the concept evolved from just leasing a facility and building it out to, and this was during the time that we were driving home.
Yeah.
She put money down on a lot, and then we went into full construction mode. So it changed from just building out a spa to building a spa from the ground up, and it evolved into a whole fitness, and not just the spa, but it was a 45,000 square foot retail
Jesus.
space as well. So my brother-in-law built a bar and restaurant on the top floor. We had the 27,000 square foot spa in there, and then we had retail down low.
And how long did that exist for?
The whole thing, well, it took us 2 years to build.
Right.
And we did it at probably one of the most difficult times in history. And unfortunately, the way we financed it was, looking back, was terrible.
Right.
Right. My sister, unfortunately, lost a lot of her IT money in the bubble burst.
Right.
And that was what was supposed to fund the spa.
Right.
And so what she started to do is she started to take out
Loans,
mortgages on the property as we were building it.
Right.
And then 2008 hit.
Yeah.
And everything collapsed.
Yeah.
So it ran for about probably 3 years.
And it was like a family enterprise, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like your brother, your sister, you. Like
Well, yeah.
everybody-
So my two sisters and I, because my other sister, Connie, the oldest, is a Pilates guru and yoga guru.
Right.
So she came and worked at the spa. And then Jimmy and I worked at the spa. My sister worked at the spa. My brother-in-law started the Smokin' Martini, which was the bar and restaurant upstairs. My brother went to work for him as a bartender. So yeah, so everybody was pretty much engaged in that concept. And when the shit hit the fan, it was one of the most difficult times of my life.
Is that and you and Jimmy went back into recruiting at that time, right?
Jimmy did not.
Okay.
I did. So Jimmy actually, that's when Jimmy started his Opportunity Knocks company.
Yeah.
So he does direct mail marketing. And he's done phenomenal things with that.
He had a dark few years there, but he's turned it around.
Oh yeah. I mean, and then he's expanded upon it. So is
he still living in the same house that they were in over there in South Tampa?
Yep, still in South Tampa.
It's been a minute since I've seen him and his wife, and they have 2 kids now, right?
They have 2 little kids. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Jimmy's amazing. This is by no means the first time I met you, but I remember back in the day before we all had kids when we used to do Gasparilla. I just remember going to Derek's house on Beta Bay.
Oh yeah.
And it was you, Boruta, who I took the Kaplan LSAT prep course.
Did you really?
Yeah. I remember he was like, he would go to Subway, buy a sub, eat all the meat out of it, and then try and get someone else to like eat the bread and the cheese and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody want this? Because he was always like drinking gallons of water and doing all this.
Scotty didn't eat carbs.
Yeah. And then his then wife,
Kamala.
Yeah. And I think Nicole Bruce was part of that crew. And then Jimmy and his wife, you. There's just this crew of attractive, fit people coming in. And then I was in the corner eating chicken wings and fucking just grinding my teeth. But so what year was it that you met Wiwa?
So let's see. So I moved back from Austin in 2002, early 2002. I met her in 2003.
Okay. I remember your wedding. What was the venue of your wedding? That was such an amazing wedding.
Yeah, it was a great day. The Ringling Museum down in Sarasota.
That's right. And you guys had cigar rollers, and you had
we went all
wasn't the Cherry Poppin' Dad? Who was the band that was you had the band that they were well known at the time. When I was a bartender at Cha-Cha, they played there constantly back when swing music. That guy's still around. I see him on
Is
Facebook.
he really?
Yeah, the guy with the top hat.
Yeah, they were amazing.
Yeah. Great band. It's great. That was just
it was
amazing.
great. It was black tie. It was a nighttime wedding.
Yeah.
We had the whole Ringling, courtyard museum area. It was amazing.
Now, had your brother been hurt yet?
My brother had already hurt. So
let's talk about your brother if we can for a minute.
So when the spa went south, it got bad quick. And both businesses were in trouble, the spa as well as the bar and restaurant. I was running the spa at the time. Jimmy had already left.
Yeah.
So I was running it. My sister wasn't talking to me anymore.
She blame you for something?
Well, so we were trying to figure out a bailout plan for the spa.
Yeah.
And
she wants you to take out a bunch of credit cards
the only way that we could get, so we got an offer from an equity team up in New York, and we were on a conference call, and it was my dad and I, because my dad obviously is engaged in all that stuff with us. So it was my dad and I and my sister and Jimmy, and we've got on the speakerphone, we've got this equity player up in New York, and he said, "You know what? I love it. I love the property. I love your concept." He goes, "But the only way I can do it, Mr. Waygood," talking to my dad, "is if you PG the whole thing, if you personally guarantee the whole loan." Uh-huh. And so the loan was a $6 million loan.
Ooh.
And my dad was 70 at the time, right? Already retired.
Right.
And so my dad said, "Okay, well, let me talk to the family and we'll get back to you." So he hits end and he looks at my sister and he says, "Lenny, what are we going to do?" And she goes down this whole thing. Oh, we got to do it. This is the only hope we have. We got to save the business. You know, go for it. And then he says, okay. And he looks at me and he goes, Chuck, what do you think? And I said, Dad, you'd be fucking crazy to do that.
Yeah.
I said, I will not let you and Mom
encumber yourself.
Yeah, encumber yourself and roll the dice with your entire.
Well, call me
retirement.
stupid, but don't you have to have that amount in equity just to back that?
It was fuzzy back then.
Yeah,
There was,
I
mean, that was.
This was before 2008.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was at the height of
creative lending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't have to have any
Sure.
equity to loans back then. So.
Yeah. Crazy.
But I mean,
crazy.
the business we were doing.
So then you became enemy number one.
Right. So
enemy of the
immediately
state.
she stopped talking to me right then.
Okay, but that's blown over since. Hasn't
Yeah.
it?
So that's good now. So, but I knew that, okay, I can't work every day next to my sister and not have her talk to me. So I said to my dad, Dad, I gotta extract myself from the situation. He goes, do what you got to do. I'll back you up on it. And so I recruited.
Sounds like an amazing man.
My dad was amazing.
We're going to talk about him.
I could do a whole podcast.
Well, we're going to talk about him in a little bit. But anyway, so go ahead.
So I said, all right, I'm going to recruit my replacement. So I recruited a guy to come in and manage the day-to-day of the spa. And I quit. And when I quit, my brother's like, well, if you're not going to be in the building, I'm not going to be in the building. So he quit at the same time. So we both planned on, so our last day at the business was Memorial Day of like 2005.
Yeah.
Right. And so the plan was take the month of June off and then look for another job. Well, at the same time, Angelia was transitioning from being a teacher.
Right.
And so I said, babe, let's you and I take the month of June and just travel together.
Yeah.
And so we put this whole itinerary together and we traveled out west. Well, my brother traveled up the East Coast. And my brother's a huge, we were born on motorcycles.
Yeah.
My dad literally, as soon as you got the training wheels off your bike when you were little, he'd put you on a little motorcycle.
Dirt bikes or
dirt bikes.
like road bikes? Okay.
Well, he'd start you on a dirt bike, but we all had road bikes.
Yeah.
At the time, I had a Harley. My brother had a crotch rocket.
Yeah.
My sister had a Chief, an Indian Chief.
Yeah.
So the whole family. My dad's got motorcycles. So long story short, my brother takes off on his trip. I take off on our, Angelia and I take off on our trip. About 5 days into our trip, I get a call from my dad. And he said, what are you doing? I said, well, we're driving right now to Park City. We're going to go, do some mountain biking. He goes, pull over. I was like, oh, shit. So I pull over. I go, what's going on? And he goes, your brother was in a motorcycle accident. I'm like, oh, my God. And my brother, growing up, my brother's 5 years younger than me. And my brother, I apologize if I get
No, it's okay.
choked up talking about it. But so my brother was always my best friend growing up. And so it hit me really hard. I said, how's he doing? And he said, they've got him in a drug-induced coma because he's broken like 30 different bones. I was like, oh my God. I said, Dad, I'm flying home right now. He goes, no, you're not. He goes, your brother would not want you to end your trip and there's nothing you can do. Mom and I are on our way up to Tennessee right now and you and Angelia stay on your trip and enjoy yourselves. And I will keep you in the loop with everything that's going on. So fast forward, long story short, my brother in that accident, he hit a bridge going about 50 miles an hour. And he had gotten thrown over the handlebars of his bike. So when he hit the bridge, the foundation of the bridge, he hit it with the crown of his helmet.
Oh, God.
And so it broke his neck. It broke his back. It broke. And then on top of it, then the bike careened in and slammed him back into the bridge.
Jesus.
So he had trauma on the back and the front of his body.
God.
And so they had to keep him in a drug-induced coma for about a week while they operated on him. And so this is 2005.
Okay.
My brother's still alive, and he is a paraplegic, so he's in a wheelchair.
Who's the guy that lives with him?
Ian Foss.
What a saintly guy.
Ian, I mean, that's a whole
other podcast.
another guy.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know how aware I was of him until this past COVID period that we kind of cohabitated within a certain.
Right.
But it's such a laid back, cool dude, and I didn't even know who he was at first, and then you told me, I was like, that's just beautiful. So
Yep.
I mean, you could explain it, but basically, now was he a friend of your brother's, or how does he come
so
into the picture?
Ian was my brother's best friend from growing up in New York. So
Right.
before we moved out of New York, Ian was my brother's best friend. And they stayed in touch. My brother went back up and graduated from high school in New York at the same high school, and they just remained best friends. And so when my brother had the accident, Ian literally quit his job in New York and moved to Florida to move in with my brother.
So, we live in a world with so much shit and so much ugliness and so much just awful, just awfulness. But what keeps me going are these little rays of beauty that peek through the clouds. And that has got to be, I mean, this guy just uproots himself from New York, moves down here and lives as your brother, and just fucking, they're friends, but he takes care of him. And it's
absolutely
such a selfless, amazing act. The fact that exists is what gives me hope that there's something else than just the bullshit,
right. Right.
Anyway, so shout out to Ian. He's a badass.
Yeah,
I think that rocks. So
yeah, I love him like a brother.
You say your brother is, as well as he can be under the circumstances. Does he work? How does he fill his days?
I mean, he's pretty independent living wise. I mean, he lives in his own house with Ian, and he can't work because he's in constant pain.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it.
Is he on disability?
He's on disability, so that keeps him going.
Sure.
He and it's interesting. This whole COVID thing. It's been a blessing and a curse.
Right.
But he has completely sheltered in place, as you can imagine. He doesn't go out much anyway.
Right.
So he's been spending a ton of time with my mom.
Oh.
So my mom, this is the first time my mom's been alone in her entire life. And, so my brother's been going over there like 3 or 4 days a week. So
that kind of transitions us into the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So you lost your father recently.
Yeah, we lost Dad on December 18th of last year in 2019.
And, if you're listening to this show already, you can tell what a pillar of the family he must have been. And it's funny, you gave me a couple different examples there between the spa, what happened with your brother, what happened with you at Stetson, where every time he kind of entered the picture as kind of the stabilizing force. And that is such a aspect of you that I love. So what's great to me is, although I don't know your father, I see him in you and the way that you've been in this family.
Wow.
The way that you've been, I talked with Chris a little bit about the passing of little Normie, when he committed suicide, and, you very much are a extension of your father. And although I don't know him, I mean, he passed that on to you.
I got to tell you, I mean, that's the greatest compliment you could get.
Well,
me.
good. Because I
appreciate that. Thank you.
So, we have both lost parents recently. I lost my dad in 2018. I lost my mom in 2019.
I know. I'm sorry to hear that.
And it's a strange thing. Now, you were one of 4. I was an only child. My parents I always considered them to be older parents. So my dad was 38 years old when he had me.
Wow.
And most of my friends' fathers were probably in their mid-20s when they had me. And I loved my dad. I loved that he was older. He was always kind of the wise, scholarly guy, but every other kid's dad was out playing in the park with him.
Right.
My dad was like, couldn't give a shit less about it. But one of the weird kind of side effects of number one, being an only child, number 2, having older parents, and then, I've talked a lot on the show about both my parents were alcoholics, is I spent a great amount of bandwidth for my entire upbringing up until they passed, worrying about them, worried about them constantly, worried about their health, worried that they were going to die early, worried that there was going to be something that happened. And so in a weird way, when it finally happened, I had been preparing my whole life for it. And the reality of it didn't end up being as bad as what I perceived the reality of it to have been. So I've had a lot of weird, not regret or remorse or guilt, but I'm almost surprised at how well I've weathered it, given how much I fixated on it before it happened. So I'm wondering your experience. I mean, obviously your dad was a huge figure in your life, role model, hero, friend, all these things. And I know it's been very tough for you, but how have you found it? I mean, you're 6 or 7 months out now, so not that it gets better, but you can kind of find a footing at a certain point.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, much like what you said, is the reality of the situation wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Right.
You feel like you can't live another day.
Right. Like, I mean,
what can't exist?
Oh my God. The last 6 months of my dad's life were rough. My dad fought cancer for years, and it finally took him. And the last 6 months were really bad. So we knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And so you're able to prepare for it. But to your point, that anxiety of the constant worry of, first of all, you don't want to see your dad in just chronic pain all the time and losing his memory and his legs swelling to the point where they burst open and bleed. And your poor mom is doing everything to take care of him. And
or maybe she had been more reliant upon him and maybe let him take the lead. Now she was kind of without a
doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. My mom called me one time crying before my dad passed. And she said, Chucky, your dad has made every decision for me for the last 60 years.
Yeah.
And now I don't know what to do.
Right. Yeah.
And you think about that for a second, and that's a terrifying point in life.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because my parents are the guiding force for me. And while my dad was absolutely my North Star, and my dad was always that sense of calm and that guiding force to be able to get through anything. You couple that with my mom, and you haven't gotten to see my mom much, but my mom is one of the most positive people you'll ever meet.
So it sounds very much similar to my parents.
She's a 3-time cancer survivor.
Yeah.
And now she lives by herself in a condo in downtown St. Pete and binge watches Netflix like the rest of us.
Yeah. Very similar situation with our parents.
Yeah.
But luckily, she's got your brother and your brother has her. So that's a positive.
That's absolutely
How's
positive.
he weathered it? Has he done okay with it?
He's probably taken it the hardest. He was the baby, and with him being in the wheelchair for the last, 10 plus years, he spent a lot of time with my parents.
Right.
And so the bond that he was able to create with my dad was really, really deep. And, my dad literally took care of him.
Yeah.
And then you couple it with the fact that my brother was holding his hand when he passed, and my brother was the only one in the room. My brother's taking it really hard.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because I don't know when I started using this phrase, but I haven't found a better way to describe it. But you have a certain amount of attention that you can pay to life, right? You've got 2 girls, you've got your wife, you've got your business. So you've got your parents, and when they're sick or ill, they might take up an inflated or an exaggerated portion of your day-to-day consideration. And when that is removed from your life, what you do with that, I've found is interesting. Do you calm down? Do you replace it by, now I'm going to worry about this and not that? Like, and that's something, because, I talked to my therapist a lot. She's like, you've attributed so much of your soul to worrying about them. With them no longer here, what are you going to do with that space? Are you going to do something positive with it? Or are you going to do something negative with it? Or are you going to, and I still don't know it. I guess maybe the podcast is part of what I'm doing with it.
Well, there you go. It's therapeutic.
But it's just interesting kind of the effects that you have. I mean, I was orphaned, not to be melodramatic, but orphaned at 44 years old. And, it's a weird thing. Your cousin, my brother-in-law, AJ, he lost his father at a very young age. And I looked to him for comfort when I lost my parents, because he had been through it already. And then, but going through it as a 13-year-old versus a 40-year-old, it's got to be considerably different.
Oh, God, I can't even imagine.
So, with the recruiting game, you've recently, I don't know how recently it is now, but you recently just moved companies, right?
Correct. Yeah. So give you a little bit of history.
You traded up pretty well.
Yeah. It's been great. So, I worked for Tech Systems. I took that break with the spa for about 4 years.
Yeah.
After the spa debacle and my brother's accident, I needed some stability back in my life. So I actually went back to Tech Systems. And they were phenomenal. They did great things for me, and they taught me a lot. And about, I'd say probably 7 years ago. So, Yeah, exactly 17 years ago. 2013, I actually left the agency recruiting game, which is what Tech Systems is, and I moved in-house to a software company based out of Silicon Valley. At the time, it was called Hortonworks, and it was a pre-IPO startup. Did that for about 6 years, and then they got bought out the end of 2018. And so it gave me the opportunity to start looking around for a new job. And because I knew they weren't going to retain me with the acquisition, and I found another startup, a new startup that's pre-IPO in Silicon Valley called Kong, and I started with them in April of last year, April 2019.
And by all accounts, you're loving it.
I love it. I mean,
has COVID affected it at all?
COVID has affected everything.
I mean, less market, less need. Like what's
there's no less need for what we do.
Yeah.
But as you can imagine, just fear alone in the marketplace makes everything
very conservative.
So we had some retraction. When it comes to spend.
Sure.
So sure, I would say Q2 was tough. From March through April, it was hard to get a lot of things done.
Right.
But the beauty is we're tied to some pretty key IT initiatives, and we've been able to weather it.
Right.
And we're coming out on the other side of it, and we're actually in a better position now than we were 5 months ago.
Right.
So it's really exciting. We're still small. It's only a 170 person company. And they've got the founders, as I'd mentioned, two guys from Italy, have some really big plans for the company. It's extremely well backed from a VC perspective. And there's no reason why this can't be a $1 billion software company in a couple of years. So that's the fun part of it. So I do love it. I love the software side of the house. I love recruiting.
San Francisco every so often is pretty rad too.
And I do like going to SF. I haven't been back out there since probably December.
Yeah.
And I don't know when I'm going to be able to go back out there.
Yeah.
But it is cool. And it was cool because when I worked for Hortonworks, they were Silicon Valley based, but they were out of San Jose.
Right.
And San Jose is completely different than that's like saying Pinellas Park versus South Tampa.
Sure.
So being an SF is fun. Again, it's a completely different way of life than what we have here in Tampa.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's an entirely different perspective and it's fun. So
that's so cool. Now you were just in the Poconos, weren't you?
Yes.
And what was that? You guys have a place up there? Do you go back and stay up there? What's the story with the Poconos?
That's a good question. So my dad is born and raised in Philly.
Okay.
And believe it or not, my dad's family, so his great grandfather developed this lake up in Pennsylvania. And they developed, it's a 3.5 mile long lake.
Right.
And they developed it in the early 1800s and actually then sold it to a developer who then developed this whole community around it. So my dad has his uncle's house. I still speak to my dad being in the present. But we have my dad's uncle's house right on the lake. Right. And it's been in the family since it was built in 1890. And with my dad passing and then COVID hitting, the family hasn't been able to go up there. Right. And so we found out that there's been a mass exodus from New York and Philly up to the Poconos. So I went to my brother-in-law and said, we got to take advantage of this opportunity and see if we can rent the house out. Right. Because somebody might want to rent it from September through May. Yeah. Because their kids aren't going to go to school and they can work remotely. So we went out and we cleaned out the whole house. As you can imagine, it literally had, 90 years worth of stuff in it. Yeah. And it was an undertaking, but we got it ready to rent. We're going to put it on the market. We're going to try and rent it out.
That's awesome.
So it's a family home up there.
So I went down the rabbit hole last night. I don't know. I know you're not on social media as much as I am, but there was this video that's come out in the past week of the White Coat Summit and all the new doctors. And there was this Stella Manuel lady who was talking about alien DNA and demon semen and all this. You're familiar with the video?
No, I'm not.
You're not familiar with it? So the new doctor that Trump is backing in this group is this one lady, and she's got all these weird kind of theories going back about alien DNA being used and people getting, I don't know, venereal diseases by having sex with demons and all this. But she's the doctor that he's backing now as to why we don't need to be wearing face masks and how the hydroxychloride, blah, 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 blah.
The fact that that's even back into the conversation is crazy.
Well, it seems about every couple months. First, it was the pandemic video, and then it was the 2 Cali doctors, and now it just seems to be like you causing dissension or causing distraction or causing whatever. And I just got into it. The big topic last night was censorship because I guess Facebook and so Don Jr. got suspended on Twitter for posting the video, and then Zuckerberg pulled it off of Facebook, and some friends of mine were like, "So you support censorship?" And I said, "Well, I don't support censorship, but I also don't support propaganda."
Right.
So, I think people have a freedom of speech, but I also worry about some of these things now that have a greater reach with the public that look real, that look like they're backed by sound science, and they persuade people to just do and say and vote and just do dumb shit. And it's
frustrating.
It's very frustrating. I had a friend of mine who sells insurance came in today, and I was talking to him about what he's going to do with his kids, and he goes, "I'm hoping Biden gets elected, and then this all goes away." And I was sitting there, I was like, I could take that a number of different ways. One is that you think Biden is going to fix the situation. 2 is that you think that this is solely a political issue that's being dredged up and trumped up to make, headlines to win an election, and that once it's over, it's going to go away. Do you have any strong opinions or feelings about it that you care to express?
Well, I'll tell you, I try to stay off of social media right now.
Well, that's forever would be the best,
right.
Except for this podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, to your point of censorship versus propaganda, and it's funny when you look at the irony of the fact that Trump has been bitching and moaning about fake news ever since before he was elected,
right?
Which could be skewed as either or,
yeah.
Right? And it's misinformation is what he's built his whole career on.
Right.
And to me, what frustrates me is the fact that public health and safety is now ensconced in this political debate.
Right.
And it's being fueled by not a change agent, but a chaos agent.
Yeah.
And when I look at Trump and the frustration I have with Trump is he's a chaos agent.
Yeah.
And if things are going smoothly, it's not good for him.
Yeah.
So he needs to have chaos.
He's got to get that base just rattling
he gets his base fired up. And it's unfortunate because I've actually been, for the last couple of months, I've been debating on whether or not to take my one social media avenue, which is LinkedIn, because I'm a recruiter. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. And actually write an open letter to Donald Trump and say, hey, you've got an opportunity to step up and be a leader.
Right.
Stop being an asshole.
Well, that's just it. I mean, there's so many opportunities during his presidency that he could have just crushed. I mean, he had his Independence Day moment 20 times over.
Absolutely. And that's what frustrates me. And
every opportunity to come in and just run the table.
And it's sad because, I've been surrounded by leadership my entire life. And so I've molded my idea on what strong leadership should look like. And while I had hoped when Trump took office that he was going to be able to step out of the bullshit.
Right.
And I was hoping that the Twitter machine was just his way to get elected and that he was going to then right the ship. And I look at it now and he couldn't be further from a leader than anybody we've ever had in history. And that's what concerns me in all of this.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's missing the opportunity to step back and say, you know what? Enough bullshit. I have the power to bring everybody together and make something great happen.
Yeah.
And he's not doing it. So
kind of changing course before we go, but I'm hoping that you've seen this, but you speak of a great role model for leadership. Did you watch The Last Dance?
No, I did not.
Oh my God. Were you ever a basketball guy?
Oh yeah. And I have to take the time to do it.
It's on Netflix now. I see Jordan in a whole completely different light than I ever did. And it's good. It's a good one, but I just didn't even perceive of what went into him being who he was.
I know. I can.
And you talk about, like, he took a team. From Trump to Jordan. He took a team that was at its lowest fucking low when he got on the Bulls. It's just a garbage team. And what he was able to do, not only with the assistance of management, but in spite of management, oftentimes,
in spite of management,
was just insanity. And there was almost this preternatural understanding of leadership and psychology and sociology and how to get the best out of people. And it wasn't even a uniform application. This person he knew he had to push. This person he knew he had to give space to. You know, Rodman says, I gotta get away, and says, can I go to Vegas for the weekend? They're like, okay. You know, Pippen and Horace Grant and all these other people, and like Steve Kerr used to bully, and Steve Kerr punched him, and then they loved each other and all this other stuff. And I'm almost done. I'm like on episode 8 or 9. That documentary needs to be shown in business school and management school and everything. That is such a blueprint for sociology, psychology, management, leadership. It's blown me away. You definitely got to watch it.
Yeah, I watched the first one, and unfortunately, I can't find the time to sit down in front of the TV.
I'm that way too, but usually I get my kids down by about 10, and then that gives me about an hour before I pass out. So I'll get like one episode in. But as you know, with Anna Maria, we've got our Irish Scotch skin. So you can do longer on the beach than I can. I get about an hour out there, and I'm like, I got to go inside. And so I'll watch it on my phone while the girls and everything play on the beach. I know you just popped up really quickly from the beach, and you're going back down tonight or tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time. It was great having you in. You're an amazing individual. You're one of my heroes. You're a great man. I think you make your father proud every day, and you're the man of the household now. So I wish you well.
I appreciate that.
All right,
Thank
Chucky,
you, Josh. I love you, brother.
I love you too.